I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Année. You met me earlier as the microphone girl, and now I will be the moderator of this panel. I'm part of the Blue Rider group at Morgan Stanley. We are financial advisors to a lot of folks and organizations in the arts and cultural community. We have a deep focus on impact and sustainable investing, and affordable housing is an area that a lot of our clients are very interested in and are looking for ways to invest in. So when given the opportunity to put together this fabulous convening here at the church, I thought that inviting Community Capital Management to be our partners today would be really wonderful, because the work that Michelle's firm does really allows our clients to both invest in affordable housing, but also do it in a way that is place-based. So a lot of investors who want to kind of know that they're supporting projects literally in their own backyard are able to access this through community capital. So I thought I would start by letting Michelle talk a little bit about her work, and you'll hand it back over to me and I'll tell people what's happening next.
Sounds good. Thank you all for coming today. It's a pleasure to be here, and my first time in Sag Harbor, so I'm really enjoying it. So I'm with Community Capital Management. We are an independently owned boutique investment advisor. We are based in South Florida, and we've been around for about 22 years. The firm was founded in 1999 with the launch of our flagship strategy, which is the CRA Qualified Investment Fund, which was originally created to help banks provide credit and capital to low and moderate income communities in which they operate for the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. So with that, banks told us the areas that they needed to make investments in, and we would go out and find those bonds for them, and they would receive positive credit from their regulator for this for the CRA Act. That garnered the attention of other institutions and eventually individual investors, and so we have grown to manage over $4 billion in assets, and we've invested about $13 billion nationwide in community economic and development investments, all of which have a measurable positive impact in local communities. So as of this year, we have invested approximately $80 million in Nassau and Suffolk County right here locally. And in Suffolk County specifically, we've invested over $52 million. So this is all through a mutual fund, so a liquid investment, very high credit quality and low risk. But what is unique about it is we are the only asset manager, to our knowledge, that allows our investors to request where they want their money to go in their local communities. So for example, you could work with Année and say, I want to invest in Suffolk County, and your investment in the fund would go directly toward affordable housing in Suffolk County, and then you would receive a report on those investments. And so it's really a great way to see this directly, see these projects happen right in your backyard.
Thank you, Michelle. So the concept for this panel was really to look nationally at what's going on in the affordable housing space and also the financing of affordable housing, and bring some of these best practices from across the country to light. So I have with us here Sandy Albert, who is a developer who primarily works in LA and Chicago. We have Charlie Kaplan, who works for GLUCK+, which is a developer and architecture firm that worked on a big affordable housing project in Aspen, hot topic today. And we have Année Kim, who works for Landed, which is a company that provides down payment assistance to essential workers. So what we'll do is we'll have each of these guys do kind of a brief presentation they put together, and then I'll come back and ask a couple of questions to each, and then we'll open it up. So we'll start with Sandy.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is working. Fantastic, thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. This is really a fantastic convening, and let's see if the slide works. You want to go to the next slide, Frank, if you're there, please? I'm not sure the clicker works. Perfect. So, yeah, I'm Sandy Albert. We're a multifamily developer based in Los Angeles and Chicago, and the company is called CityPads, and our latest venture is our housing fund, too. So you can go to the next slide, please. So, when we think about housing, we think about community, and I think that, community, whether it's affordable housing, capital A affordable housing, lowercase a affordable housing, or even market rate affordable housing is the most important thing. I think it drives everything, especially from what we were talking about in the last couple panels. So, if you go to the next slide, please, Frank. This just gets at much of what I think we all know and what we've talked about today, about the fact that there is just such an acute housing shortage in the United States. And the math backs this up. So, the country is 5.5 million housing units short. The two charts on the lower left show that we have not produced nearly enough housing in all way, shape, or form to keep up with demand, even since the late 60s and early 70s. And then the chart on the far lower left there just shows how far demand for all types of housing has outpaced supply, even especially since 2008, 9, and 10. If you go to the and I'm sorry, just go back real quick, and then and we think that basically, and this is to echo some of what was said in previous panels, stems from mostly long-standing restrictive zoning policies. Essentially, has what's mainly inhibited the type of new supply that is needed. So go to the next slide, please. And then what does this lead into? This leads into our affordability crisis, or the fact that housing in cities, villages, and towns, small, medium, and large, has become drastically unaffordable. And it's just pure math. The numbers show this stuff. So, 10 million renters, 1 in 4 in the U.S. pay more than half of their income on rent. You can see just the growth in unaffordability in the country over the past several decades. And you can see that pretty much every state in the country from 2012 to 2019 has become less affordable. And that's not even taking into consideration what we've seen happen in the housing market in the past 2 years. I think we all know. Okay, next slide, please. So what are we doing at CityPads? We think that the real challenge lies in creating housing, building housing for what many call the missing middle now, with folks that don't qualify for true capital A, affordable, government subsidized housing, but can't afford to live in luxury Class A apartments, let alone buy a home in whatever city or neighborhood or town or village they want to live in. So that's the big issue we see. If you go to the next slide, please. So look, this is an argument as to why to continue to invest in amazing cities like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, places hopefully we all know and love. But the arguments, I think, ring true for incredible places and communities like Sag Harbor and the East End and these neighborhoods that are so vibrant and full of culture and places to go and congregate and nature and open space. People want to be here. People want to live in these places because there are built-in demand drivers. So if we go to the next slide, so what's our approach, our specific approach? Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so basically we have come up with 4 main tenets of how we invest in, develop, and build housing. And these are things that nothing that we've made up. These are ideas that have existed for a long, long time. First of all, walkability and transit-oriented. That is the backbone of neighborhoods and community and social activity. Density, using density and design to drive affordability. It's a positive thing. It's a positive thing. But then not taking a build it and they will come approach, but focusing on what is the human experience. What is the experience of the renter going to be once they're in the property? So focusing on operations, not only on the marketing and leasing, but using operations and technology to create a great experience for that fantastic person when they're in the property. And then finally, and this is, you'll see that we're a Los Angeles developer because we talk about this, is we build housing for people, not cars. And this is something, maybe we don't have, although, we're not in Manhattan, obviously, so maybe you need a little bit more cars out here, but we build housing for people, not cars. And this is huge because this helps us get at the affordability, as a matter of fact, because building parking garages is expensive. And if you build an expensive parking garage, whether it's below grade or above grade, your construction costs are more. And then what do you have to do? You have to charge higher rents for your apartments to make it make sense. Now, if you don't build the parking garages, the cost of the project is less. And guess what? You can charge lower rents and create a more affordable, attainable product for people. So, okay, next slide. This just goes into detail on why walkability and transit-oriented locations and neighborhood retail is just so important. And you see this built into the community here as well. Jane Jacobs would most certainly approve. Okay, next slide. And I think that has to do with equity and sustainability and safety as well. Eyes on the street. Density is driving affordability. Again, if we go to the next slide, so this is really what it's all about, right? This is what we love. We design our buildings from the inside out, as a matter of fact. And we love architecture, and we love contextual architecture and history and preserving fantastic architecture, but we design our projects from the inside out. And what we do is by creating denser unit types, whether it's smaller studios or one-bedroom units, or even micro units, we heard the word efficiency later, or even roommate units or family units, which, by the way, this is the way our towns and villages and cities have been designed since the beginning of time. You think of the great boarding houses and family houses of New York City and Chicago, of how people used to live intergenerationally with families, with roommates, as singles, from the beginning of time. And this is how we look to design our projects, a little bit more dense, but not only does that provide the affordability, we think it fosters community. Next slide. And then again, focusing on operation. So not just designing a project, financing a project, getting it approved by community and building it, but how does that building function once it's built? And staying involved and using best practices from an operations and technology standpoint to make the life of the resident really fantastic. Next slide, please. And then this is the idea of just creating more housing for people as opposed to cars, which is, this is really site-specific and city-specific, depending on what that means. But this is one of our basic premises. And the next slide, please. And then we can just breeze through this. So what do these projects look like? And again, like the exterior can take on many different shapes or form, but I think I want to show, just go to the next slide, we can show, so what does this stuff actually look like? This is really great, clean, contemporary, durable materials and kitchens. I mean, this is not your grandma's boarding house, and it's not even a boarding house. This is modern day new construction workforce housing, and this can fit in any neighborhood, any community. Next slide, please. Lots of great amenity and community space that is designed for people to congregate, have events, work from home, so on and so forth. These are really important, becomes an extension of your living room. Next slide, please. Again, more workspace. You can see the level of finish and detail. Next slide. Bathrooms. So again, quality materials, but not Class A, not luxury, just normal housing for folks. Next slide, please. And obviously, usually outdoor space, roof decks are fantastic. We love yards, front yard and side yards, and obviously gym space is great. Next slide, please. And then, this is what it can look like in an urban setting, in an urban fabric, where most of our projects in Los Angeles and Chicago are about 75 units to 100 units, so not small, about 5 to 7 stories. But the previous panel talked about the idea of different unit types within the building. So we absolutely mix in the truly affordable. We usually do a percentage of truly affordable with the attainable or lowercase a market rate affordable, and then everything will be mixed in. And even when we're doing family units or roommate units versus a studio or a 1-bedroom, it'll all be interspersed within the property, and that's really, we think, the best way to do it. So that's how we think about designing and building and creating and operating new housing in the markets and the cities that we're active in. And I was just hoping and thinking that maybe some of these ideas can also be shared and used in a beautiful, amazing place like Sag Harbor as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. That was inspiring. Nice to see that work. My name is Charlie Kaplan. Can you hear me now? I just was speaking into it, I think. I'm with GLUCK+. We're an architecture firm in Harlem, in New York City. We do a lot of work all over the country. We do a lot of housing work, although not just housing. We do a lot of work in various communities, schools, playgrounds, different kinds of projects, but we do a lot of housing. Pictured here are housing projects all over the country, most of them in New York City, but New Haven, Brooklyn, Central Park North. This is up in Inwood, down on the Lower East Side. And these are, hopefully you can't tell which ones are the luxury products and which ones are the true affordable housing, because there is a real mix here. And we really believe in bringing real design and really creating a sense of place to each project. Regardless of its income level. And so my talk today is going to really focus on a specific project in Aspen, Colorado, and I think it's a relevant site, a relevant place compared to Sag Harbor. It's a similar sized community, a little bit bigger, but where a sense of place is really important and has a very specific sense of place to begin with. So how did I get interested in Aspen? How did we get interested in Aspen? I grew up as a kind of a ski racer, ski bum, and my boss, Peter Gluck, also was a ski racer, or a skier, and I had connection with Aspen. My brother has lived there many, many years, and we started looking at Aspen and thought that we could apply kind of our design chops to a very kind of specific place. We were interested in housing, interested in affordable housing, and to some of the points brought up earlier, we really wanted to see if we could make a difference and use our sort of design abilities to do that in a place where it really mattered. So we looked at Aspen specifically. There we go. So Aspen's interesting. This is obviously an overhead Google shot, really taken today. And you can see there is a very discernible kind of city grid in Aspen. Again, a little bit bigger than Sag Harbor, but not unlike, say, Bridgehampton or East Hampton. It's bounded by mountains on all sides, so in a way it's landlocked. So land is very scarce and very expensive. One of the things Aspen does have that a lot of places don't have is it has an ingrained city grid. that was established in the 1800s because of the kind of the mining rush, which we think is a really great thing. Sag Harbor, too, in a way, has a kind of grid, a kind of fabric that can be built off of. Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. So, physically, in terms of the layout of Aspen, Aspen is at the top of a long valley. You really can't go past Aspen, at least in the summer you can, but it's kind of the head of the valley. In the winter, you're blocked off. And it's really 40 miles from Aspen on one road to Glenwood Springs. And there's really no other way to get there. So it's very similar in a way to the Hamptons, where you're really kind of landlocked. And then once you get to Glenwood Springs, there's the I-70 corridor, which on the one hand goes all the way to Denver, to the east, and all the way to LA eventually. But that corridor, in terms of servicing Aspen, is roughly 40 miles, and it's even grown to maybe 80 miles. So what you have is you really have people that are commuting these days as much as 80 to 100 miles to get to Aspen, so they can be the teachers, doctors, all the things that we've been talking about today, which obviously leads to tons of traffic. It leads to a town in Aspen that half the year is dark. But Aspen is an interesting place because let's see if I can get this to go. Next slide, please, if I can't get it. It's an interesting place because they were really the first housing authority created in a resort town in America. It really started in the late 70s, early 80s. The city and sort of county commissioners had the foresight. They started to see the housing stock start to disappear, and they said, hey, we've got to do something about this. People aren't going to be able to live here. And so back in I think it was 1983 or 4, they literally got legislation passed that basically any real estate transfer that happened in the town of Aspen, 1% of that transfer had to be paid as transfer tax into a housing fund. So, at the time, real estate was expensive there, but it wasn't crazy like it was today. But what's happened is as real estate's become more and more expensive and more transactions have happened, that housing fund has happily grown sort of at equal pace. So what's pictured here is these are all the different housing projects that have been built over the now it's really 40 years in Aspen, and they now have 3,000 affordable units in Aspen. About half of those are ownership and about half are rental. It's phenomenal. I mean, the overall population of Aspen today is about 7,000. So you have 3,000 people that are living in the affordable housing program, 50%. So if this program didn't exist, Aspen really would be a dark town, half the year. So Aspen does have this really amazing fabric. You can see the old Victorian homes, which have been preserved. They have a very strong landmarks commission in Aspen, I think very similar to Sag Harbor. They go crazy about really, really preserving these homes. And they've done a good job of it. The other thing Aspen does have is in the 40s, the Pepke family from Chicago started the ski area, and at the same time, they created the Aspen Institute, which is a real kind of cultural kind of anchor for Aspen. And they also brought sort of modernism to Aspen, which has become part of the fabric along with the Victorian fabric. Sorry, next slide, there we go. So this is an image from the 1890s, again, showing the city grid that I was referencing. This city grid was really created, really a series of mining shacks and businesses all linked together by kind of an urban structure. And really what's allowed Aspen to have kind of a really variegated architectural character to this day. The interesting thing about this slide is you can see that this is actually the ski mountain right here today. And this side of sort of the base of the mountain was today, before we did our project, was completely undeveloped, but you can see here was part of the city grid. And you can see that there's a mining operation, which is actually, I'm going to talk about soon, was our site. Next slide. Okay. So this is what I was just referencing. This is the site that we found in Aspen that's on this, what used to be part of the city grid and no longer became kind of open space, de facto open space in a way. So when we found this site, it had been sort of glossed over by a lot of other local developers for multiple reasons. One, it was the former site of mining, and so there's mine waste rock on the site. The other is that, as you can see, it's at the base of this kind of cliff, and so there was potential rockfall on the site. So this was kind of a site that that developers call kind of a site with hair on it. It's difficult to develop, and I think in most places, if you're going to find a way to do housing, you have to find land somehow. And so we felt like, as architects, we could really exercise again our kind of design chops and really figure out how to make opportunity here. So this is the kind of, in a way, the localized city grid around our site, and you can see on the far side of the road where the mountain is, there was no development at all. And so our challenge is really, how do you create something there? We started with, next slide, please. There we go. We started with what you could do as of right. So this has been talked about a lot today. So what you can do as of right in Aspen, like almost every town in America, is you can do single-family homes. You cannot do affordable housing. You cannot do multifamily housing. You cannot do any of that. So we could have built 4 free market homes right off the bat without having to go to community board meetings, without having to do anything, right? But we didn't want to do that. We really wanted to do something that would make an impact on the community. We came up with a proposal. I don't have a slide for it, but where we said to the town did have a program where you could do a mix of free market and affordable units, and you would get extra free market development rights if you built the affordable. A lot of townships, New York City has programs like that, sort of the 20% affordable kind of program. We felt like, so we started down that road, and then we realized that if we were going to do that, we could build 4 free market homes and 8 affordable. And it just didn't seem like enough for a site like this. So we went to the town and we said, what if we made this all affordable? We think we could do 14 units. And so the town became interested. There was political will. They have the housing coffers, like I pointed out. They have the transfer tax, so they had funds. And they said, that's a great idea. We will take 50%, what amounted to essentially 50% of your costs we'll subsidize. It was about $4 million at the time. And so what we did is we got rid of the free market component and created an affordable only project. Next slide. And that took care of most of the funding that would make the project financially viable, but we still weren't totally there. So the second thing we did do is we took the upper half of the site, and knowing that there was a town trail system that stopped on our site, we proposed that we create a conservation easement on the back half of our site and let the trail come through the backside. That was sort of a win-win for everyone. Colorado has a program for creating conservation easements. There's a way that you're essentially devaluing your property, you're taking away development rights, and in exchange you're given tax credits, which you can sell on the free market, on the open market. So we did that, and that created another roughly 1/8 of the value of the project, and that was enough to really make it financially viable. But it took this kind of back and forth and figuring out funding sources and negotiations with the different sort of bureaucratic bodies to kind of make the financing really work, all of which took us 7 years to really get through the entitlement process. So it took patience. So from a design point of view, I'm going to sort of switch to the design side. So we knew we had this kind of housing block, and so we knew that we had to somehow start to bring light and air into the housing block. So this slide also shows that we punched a hole in the middle to make kind of a courtyard scheme, which is a pretty traditional housing kind of typology. But we also knew that this kind of block, if you look at the scale and proportion of that block compared to the local, neighboring Aspen fabric, it's too big. And so we started to think about how can you break down the block into smaller elements. Sorry, next slide. There we go. So the first thing we did is, in Aspen, we did have to deal with the car. I wish that we didn't have to deal with the car. In fact, so we ultimately created 14 units, which meant 25 parking spaces. It's a lot of parking spaces. It's a lot of apartments that we could have built if parking wasn't a requirement, right? Luckily, we have a steep site, so we could build the housing into the slope. So you'll see in the finished images, you don't really see the parking. We were able to kind of tuck it away. But what we did is we created kind of this gap on the left-hand side and allowed the courtyard to become kind of the parking and pedestrian court. But still, you can see the housing block is still too big. So we said, what else can we do? So we came up with this concept of carving slots through the project. And what that does is it breaks down the one large housing block into 5 separate kind of more house-sized elements. You can compare kind of the size of the volumes. And what we did is we made it so that, normally you have a housing block and you have all your circulation, meaning the corridors that connect you to your apartment, inside the building. That makes the building bigger, and it also makes for oftentimes not a great experience. You're in a double-loaded corridor with apartments on either side, and it's a very anonymous feeling. So we use these slots, which allow you to have views of the mountains behind, is circulation, outdoor circulation to get to your apartment. It makes it feel much more like a single-family experience. The other thing it does is it makes almost every apartment have corners. So it makes almost every apartment in the complex a corner apartment. There we go. So this is the finished project, and you can see this. You can see the slots that carve through the project and make these kind of house-scaled elements. So there's an apartment here, an apartment here, an apartment here. So it's very kind of broken down. Next slide, please. Yeah, and there you go. And this is the sort of entrance from the street up into the complex. So visitors and guests can go kind of through here and access the apartments. Next slide. Yep. And this is the continuation of that slot up into the stairs, goes up into the trail system, the conservation easement beyond. And then you can see it connects to all of these exterior walkways. And what we did is, all of the sort of kitchens and kind of the public space, but the more private part of the public space faces the courtyard and is relatively, you have windows, but it's relatively private. And then and so that's again the same. This is the kind of courtyard, and it's a very communal place. The cars are down below, and then the back side of the apartments, which you don't see in this image, I'll show at the end. They all face the mountains and they all face the street, and that's where the living rooms are, and that's almost all glass. This is down in the courtyard. You can see how the cars tuck in, but it creates this nice kind of pedestrian kind of communal space. Next slide. There we go. We played a lot with, I think somehow maybe I skipped it or I didn't see the slide here. I think I must have skipped it. But a lot of the design and the kind of materiality, we were playing with the Aspen mining forms that you see. A lot of strong mining buildings with corrugated metal, with wood siding, not unlike what you see here. And we wanted to really kind of play that up. And so we really played up this idea of all of these corners that we created with the slots with the way that we detailed the metal. And then this is what I was referring to. This is the kind of public side of the apartment that always either faces the street or the mountain, which is almost all glass. Yeah, okay. So this is a Google image taken a couple days ago. It's amazing how you can do that. And this is actually Main Street in Aspen. You can see the Victorian fabric in the foreground, and then you can see the Aspen it's actually called the Little Ajax Affordable Housing, down the block. And you can see the way that it kind of nestles into the mountainside. One of the things at the time when we were going through the entitlement process, the most difficult thing was not the actual government bureaucracy. We had a lot of support there, a lot of political will for affordable housing. It was really the neighbors who were really terrified. They were terrified it was going to change the character of their neighborhood. They were terrified it was going to hurt their property values. All the usual things of NIMBYism that we've been talking about today. The neighbors were progressive people. They wanted affordable housing. They just didn't want it literally right there where they had been sending their kids to play soccer every day. And so, there was that sort of 10%, when we did community board hearings and the like, 90% of the public was on board and wanted it to happen, but probably only 50% of those 90% showed up at the meetings, whereas 100% of the 10% who didn't want it to happen showed up at the meetings. And so, I just want to say, and we'll get to some of this, but that is, in Sag Harbor, you will face that no matter what. And ultimately, there will be people who don't want to see it happen. You're not going to convince 100%. You're going to convince 90%. If you do it right and you really try to create a sense of place, you'll convince 90%. But then 15 years later, I think if you go back and you talk to the same neighbors, they wouldn't want to see the Little Ajax affordable housing disappear. I think it's become part of the fabric, and they love it. So the last slide, as you can see, one of my arguments for this is really, you can see this is now taken from above. Again, Google's amazing. It was a couple days ago. initial images I showed you, there was nothing developed here. It was all empty. And so we built our project, and you can see these are all free market homes that went in next to it, which I think is proof in the pudding. This did not devalue those. In fact, I think it increased the value of everything around. And there's actually some affordable housing here now. And back to my original slide showing there's really one of the interesting things about Aspen is they haven't concentrated all of their affordable housing in one place. It's really throughout the entire fabric of Aspen itself. They do have some larger projects that are maybe 5 miles out of town on the outskirts, but the bulk of it is really integrated into the town fabric. And I think that's really important for Sag Harbor and like communities that you find a way to really integrate the housing into the community. And I think if you know, from a design point of view, if you do it right, it can fit in. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Année Kim, and I'm from Landed, and thank you so much for inviting me. So what does Landed do? If somebody can do the first slide, that'll be great. We deal with potential homeowners, and in towns like Aspen and clearly, you know, New York, California, all these very expensive areas. How does an essential professional, meaning teachers, healthcare workers, the people who uphold your community, how do they afford homes? So Landed was created to help provide down payment program for those essential professionals so that they can get into a home, make it easier for them, and also make it affordable. And so how do we do that? We provide mainly down payment assistance. And why is this important? It takes years and years for an essential professional to save up to come up with the down payment. But that's not the only thing. Down payment is one thing, and then you got to come up with a monthly payment. And so being able to help a home buyer get to 20% down payment allows them to reduce their monthly payment. If we can go to the next slide, that would be great. So what Landed has come up with is that we decided that if we provide up to $150,000 to an individual and 15% of the down payment, they can get to a 20% down payment. What does that allow the individual to do is they're then able to access Fannie Mae conventional conforming mortgages. I don't know what percentage you all put down to buy your homes, but anything less than 20% requires what's called a private mortgage insurance premiums. In America, the average down payment is actually very low. It's not 20%, it's around 7%. So the bank charges you extra. It's usually around 1.75%, which can be a lot for somebody who doesn't make a lot. And by using Landed program, our home buyers don't have to pay the PMI. And if you can only have to take out 80% of the home purchase price, that means also your monthly payment is smaller. So it's really about this sort of, it's a financial instrument, and we allow our buyers to do that. And then you say, well, okay, so if they borrow that money from you, don't they have to pay you a monthly payment? The answer is no. And how do we make this happen? So what the home buyer does is that in exchange for the down payment that we provide, they agree to share in the change in value of their home. And it's both on the upside and the downside. And so if the home appreciates, they'll share a certain percentage with us. And if home price goes down and if they sell, then Landed absorbs the loss as well. And can we stay on the other slide for a little bit? This is a special program. Real estate agents and lenders who are not familiar with how it works, very difficult to help the customer. So we have developed a relationship with agents across the country and lenders so that they can help our home buyers. And then we have it's a 90% company at the moment, and so we have a vast home buying support system because home buying is incredibly complicated. Now, why home ownership instead of rental? I think affordable housing in any form in a community is really important. But at the end of the day, American tax system and laws favor the homeowner. And without a home, which is basically the largest asset you'll ever own, it's very difficult to then have financial well-being. And when you look at the home ownership gap in the country, home ownership nationally, it's close to 70%. But home ownership among minorities and white families, for black families, it's 30% gap. For Hispanics, it's a 15% gap. And so our program today, I don't think I have this slide, but can we go to the next slide, please? For our company, we've served over 1,000 customers so far, and out of 1,000 customers, close to 50% of our customers are folks of color and folks who make less than 80% of the average median income. And so the program by design helps people of that population. And then in terms of, just to give you an idea of how we share and how the program works, so all the way on the left, it'll show you the percentage of down payment that we provide. And then the second column is the percentage of down payment. And the way the formula is split and how we share the upside, we give the lion's share of the upside to the customer so that they can buy us out when they're ready to exit. And so I think our program is designed pretty fairly. But shared equity in concept has been around since the 1970s. And currently there are about 250,000 homes nationwide. And the program is usually provided by not-for-profits or city or state governments. But there's a big weakness to this program. The upside is capped. So if the upside is capped, then as a wealth building tool, there's a weakness there. So we have designed our program so that there's no cap on the upside and it's market rate. And the homeowner can go and choose a home that they want to live in. It's not affordable, it's just market rate homes. Okay, next slide. So how do we provide this program? This map is a little outdated. We're currently operating in 13 states, and we're going to be expanding into additional regions across the country. And we primarily work with employers, so healthcare institutions, educational institutions, city governments, state governments, utility companies will come to us, or we go to them, and we offer it as like a quasi-employee benefit. So in Suffolk County, we have started a relationship with Stony Brook Southampton Hospital. We're currently in conversation with Stony Brook University, the healthcare system. And so if any of you work for a city government or educational institution and was interested in the program, you would be eligible. So the next slide. So this is just summarizing what I had said earlier, that it's used mainly as a wealth building tool. And so far we've served over 1,000 customers, and this year we expect to double that. And then obviously our customers have done incredibly well in the last few years as homes have appreciated, and we have helped them generate $67 million in wealth. And I'm going to start coughing a lot, so I'll stop and then answer questions.
Hello. Oh, this one works. Thank you so much. I'll come back to you maybe a little bit later. Thank you for that. So just a couple of quick follow-ups, because I'm sure the audience has, frankly, more questions than I do for you guys. So maybe Sandy, can you talk a little bit about how developing out here is different than developing in markets like New York and Chicago and LA? And if you were to come into a community like this, what you think some of the challenges might be?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's working. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's a really great question. And I think, first of all, are there any local developers here? Any local developers here? Don't be shy. Great. Because for me, this is where it's at. This is really important. It's about the community. So, I'm fifth generation Californian. My father's an architect of 45 years in Los Angeles. My business partner, is based in Chicago. It's about community, and you have to know your community, and you have to listen to your community. And so we build and develop and invest in essentially our backyard, because we are just invested there. And I view my constituents, our stakeholders, is our community, our residents, and our investors, and that's it. And those are who we're responsible to. And so I'm there, and we're going to be held accountable for what we do, and hopefully it's for the positive. So I think that if we were to come to a new place, we would have to know our community, and we would want our community to know us. And I think that's really, really important. And then I think that, for us, we're building housing relatively quickly. We know what we can do essentially as of right, utilizing zoning that's in place. So we usually go through like a year to a year and a half entitlement process. We work closely with our neighbors, with our elected officials, and with our planning council. But I think to answer just directly and succinctly, I would have to know exactly what the timeline, what the process is, and know that there's will to do and build what we want to build. And I would have to fully understand the demand drivers. Who are our renters going to be? What's the economy? Is it teachers? Is it firefighters? Is it artists? Is it tech employees? Is it families? Is it young? Is it old? And you have to understand that. And I think for the community, for the developers to empathize with the community, and the community to empathize with the developers in that regard is what it takes, because it's not easy on both sides. And hope that gives a decent answer.
Thank you for that. So maybe Charlie, to you, and I loved your presentation, and I think that the end product of what you created is really sort of context specific. And I'm curious, you're also familiar with this area because you spend a lot of time out on the East End. What are the design sort of sensibilities that you think would be important to inform a project happening out here? And also maybe you can catch us up on maybe some of the exciting things going on in the kind of building world that might come into play in building multifamily housing out here.
Sure. No, thanks for that question. I think a little bit alluding to what Sandy just talked about, I do think the important part about design and designing in a place that's very special, Aspen's a very special place, and I think Sag Harbor is a really special place, is each project has to be its own thing. You really have to be there, you have to listen, you have to look, and you have to try to fit the project into its context. It's the most important thing, and probably the hardest thing to do as a designer. I think there are a lot of exciting things that have happened in the design and build world that make it exciting, I think. So, for instance, I think Sandy and some of the other panelists alluded to this idea of kind of consolidating housing, micro-housing, things like that, where you can start to build, you can make the units smaller and more efficient, but then you're building a larger sort of community component. And I think that's a real way of tying a project and a design into its communities, by having real community and public space. And as an architect, it's really fun. It's much more fun to design public space than it is to design little apartment cells. And so this prospect of being able to integrate into the community with public space and community space, I think, is really exciting. The other thing that's happening, I think, in the design world is there's been a real push to do modular. And modular is really misunderstood in the world. A lot of people think it means that everything's going to be cookie cutter and the same. But actually what it really means is that you can build a totally customized thing in a factory and build it under good conditions and then erect it very quickly. So in a place like Sag Harbor, that could be a good thing, because otherwise you have a construction site that's open and causing impacts, noise impacts and pollution impacts for sometimes a couple of years. So I think that's an exciting trend. Was there other parts of that question I missed?
No, that's good. And it's actually a nice preview for our closing keynote with Ellen Baxter, because she'll talk about the Sugar Hill Children's Museum project that she worked on. And, it's just this idea that not only are you building housing, but you're also potentially putting in like really valuable community space or school space or whatever else a community needs. And these really could be truly mixed use projects. So I'm excited.
Well, I'm going to
session.
add one
Yeah,
more thing,
sure.
just because I just thought of it. Because there was conversation earlier about the kind of balancing between environmental concerns and water quality concerns and housing, and how do you do all of that. But I think with the new push, sort of environmental push that we're all feeling, and I think trying to get behind ourselves, I think that affordable housing can really serve as a model where you can, because I think there are public dollars out there both for affordable housing, and there's also public dollars out there for doing things that are sustainably minded. And I think affordable housing is a great way to create housing models that really work with that kind of environmental concerns in mind. They can become the models for the fancy 10 and 15 bedroom houses that we talked about earlier, rather than the other way around.
Totally. So Année, just to finish with you, so one, kind of a clarifying point, I think I'd be curious to learn more about the price point of the homes that you're helping people purchase, if you could address that. And then conceptually, as you referenced, there have been down payment assistance programs for a long time. I think, one, you talked about the caps potentially not being there with yours. What are the other kind of differences of your approach versus a government or public policy approach? And finally, I think it's a very compelling program, and clearly to have it be adopted more in this area, it needs to kind of make its way through employers or through. So basically, what's the best way to spread the word about this and actually get more people taking advantage of this sort of assistance?
Sure. So in terms of the program and how we're different from not-for-profits, we don't put any restrictions. So people, no income restrictions. We're colorblind. We're income blind. There's a restriction on how much money we will provide. So it's max of $150,000 or 15% of the home purchase price. We think this is incredibly important because in Southampton, you work for Southampton Hospital. If you're a doctor and you have decent income, you still might not be able to afford a home. So we think this is really important to building a community. So the individual decides whether they can benefit from the program. But majority of our customers are first-time home buyers. So that's close to 70%. And majority of our customers also make less than 150% of average median income. And, but we think it's really important to keep things open. And then the second question was?
The government caps you talked about, price point, just how to spread the word around it.
Oh,
I guess,
okay.
How have you been?
I do want to say one thing about potential public funding. The local governments, whether you're a county, city, or state, has the lowest cost of financing. It's very close to treasury rates. So you could use public dollars to create a shared equity program for your community. And if there's any public official here who's interested in this idea, I would be more than happy. And we just finished, there was a big California state announcement exactly on a potential program, and it's very large. And we consulted them as well, and so we'd be happy to talk to you about that. And then in terms of spreading the word, is that if you know of a school, a hospital, clinic, or even local government officials, and they would be interested in offering this program to their employees, we'd be happy to speak to them. And any individuals too, they can just go on our website.
Perfect. So I think we'll open it up. Cece, how much time do we have roughly? 3 minutes, okay. There's a hand back there. Maybe someone could take the mic around. Here, lady in blue, you can take mine and start.
I have a quick question. What is affordable in Aspen?
So they have, their program mirrors a lot of other programs. They have their own AMI kind of system. So the ones that we did were sort of the equivalent of 60% and 80% AMI. So the people who live there are doctors, teachers, nurses in town. That's sort of the people who could afford it.
What does that mean? Does that mean 3,100? Does that mean 1,600? Is that like?
So those were for sale units.
Oh, that's right.
So at the time, and we had 14 units, 13 of which were 3-bedroom. And the 3-bedroom units cost at the time the higher AMI were $270,000, and the lower AMI were $220,000. And the units, the 3-bedroom units, were about 1,400 square feet, to give you a sense. So $300-400 a square foot compared to, I don't know what it is, 2,000, 3,000. The number keeps going up.
This is a question for whoever feels most qualified to address it. Not that we don't have enough difficulties and challenges in creating attainable housing. What are your projections for the future in terms of challenges and opportunities in the changing economic environment that it's clear we're beginning to face in terms of the R word, potential recession or downturns in the economy? How will that impact our mission moving forward? And do you see challenges and opportunities in that regard?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I'll try and tackle it first real quick, if that's okay. I think that, the sensitivities are huge, as we all know, and change is difficult. But if we don't change, if we don't grow, and if we don't build, we will be left behind. And what we're facing in the world today with regard to costs, supply chain, potential recession, social issues, they're not going to solve themselves. Think of what Eric and April have built here, how we can congregate and create community. If we want to keep our cities and neighborhoods vibrant, exciting, and equitable, we have to create and build.
I would also add that I think in a recessionary environment, you see a lot of people actually looking to invest in real estate. And as Mark pointed out in his presentation, it's like a multi-billion-dollar problem. So I do think that you'll continue to see flows into this space. And it's just a question of like, are those dollars being connected to the right communities, which I think is what we're all trying to do in this room.
Anna,
So.
we have a question here.
Hi, my name is Bob Plum. I'm a trustee here in the village, and we've been working on this for now about 6 months. And my question is generally this, like, for instance, the one in Aspen or the others, if you have publicly subsidized housing, how does the tenant selection process work? Does it go, is it by project? Or, for instance, does Aspen have a lottery? And how would you think that would apply to us at a local level, to the extent that you would know at this level?
Sure, I can speak to Aspen a little bit. Aspen has a lottery system. And for our project, I think we had the 14 units. There were 100 people in the lottery. So obviously a lot of need. And I think the way the lottery system works is essentially, well, first of all, to qualify, you have to have lived and worked in Aspen a minimum of 3 years or something like that. And then I think the more times that you've applied and not gotten housing, the more tickets you get to put into the tumbler. So I think it's as equitable in a way as they can be. They try to, in a way, randomize it, but weight it towards the people who've been in the community longer.
Yeah, sure. It's generally speaking, though, as a rule, if it's publicly subsidized, it would be subject to some kind of lottery or selection process along those lines.
The other thing in Aspen that is a little different than maybe what Année talked about, and I think it's a necessity in Aspen, it's unfortunate, but it's a necessity, is the home ownership units that we did, they do have a cap, so they can't appreciate more than 3% a year. And I think in a place like Aspen or Sag Harbor, it's a double-edged sword, but if you don't do that, those units become quickly unaffordable, like the next day kind of thing.
Okay, we are going to wrap up, but look forward to taking more of these at the town hall later. So thank you.